Okay.
Welcome everyone to another search seminar. Volker, you have 50 minutes and then 10 minutes for questions. Take it away.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dan, first of all, and the other organizers for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here virtually. Dan, by the way, can you remind me from time to time, how much time is left,
Absolutely. If it doesn't annoy you, I can
Yeah.
give you a 20-minute and a 10-minute
Okay.
one.
Thanks. So most important thing to say here is that this is joint work with Patrick Ray from Toulouse. And in some sense, the title already tells you what this paper is about, but nevertheless, let me try sort of to motivate a little bit what we're trying to do here. So as you know, in today's internet age, we all face a choice among a huge number of different products, and finding out what we like best and actually what the characteristics of the products are and what the final price is actually has become a complicated, time-consuming task. And I guess that's, as you all know, is probably one of the main reasons, why consumer search has now this, in the last 10 or 15 years, has this resurgence again, this renaissance. Related to this, I guess, is also the fact that the evidence, at least informally, that retailers and platforms often seem to divert search by consumers, at least don't make it easy for consumers to find the right product. And relatedly, there's also quite some experimental evidence that shows that too much choice, too much quotes, can induce consumers to refrain from buying anything. And that's sort of called choice overload. Let me, in interest of time, just mention one famous experiment by Boatwright and Nunes, which was an experiment run by an online grocery store, and where they had two groups, an experimental group and a control group. And in the experimental group, they just decided to halve the product selection. And the result of that was that the sales in that experimental group were 11% higher than in the control group with a larger product selection. So somehow, more products seem to put some of us off from buying anything, it seems. Now, what we do in this paper is to develop a model of sequential consumer search in which there's just a single seller who chooses the size of his product portfolio as well as the composition, what products to offer, which products not to offer, and what price to charge. Now, the important ingredient is going to be a particular form of heterogeneity, namely that products differ in their popularity, which is the probability with which a consumer has a match. If a consumer doesn't have a match with a product, for sure he's not going to buy it because he doesn't like it. Now, consumers initially only observe the size of the product line, but by engaging in costly sequential search, they can find out the prices of the products and whether or not they have a match, and in the case they have a match, what their match condition valuation is. And consumers are heterogeneous in terms of their search costs. And then within this model, we're going to ask a number of questions. How does consumer search behavior look like? What are the prices that firms are going to charge? How does a change in the size of the product line affect consumer search? How many consumers are going to search? In particular, do we get choice overload? And also going back to very old questions, having Simon here, I think he has also done this in a number of his papers. Does the firm provide socially excessive or insufficient product variety? And then also we're interested in some comparative statics, and we're also interested in finding out whether and to what extent the firm has an incentive to direct consumer search. Okay, and given that I've not that much time, let me give you a very quick preview of the results. What we show is that for a given size of the product line, the firm is doing what you think probably the firm should be doing, namely choose the most popular products, but then charge the monopoly price for each one of them. And the consumers, they're going to either not, depending on their search cost, they're either not going to search, or those consumers who choose to search are going to choose until they find a match, or exhausted all products on offer. And an increase in the size of the product line has two opposing effects in terms of for consumer welfare, if you like. So on the one hand, it means that it increases the probability of those consumers who choose to search, of the probability of finding a match. Okay, that's good. But at the same time, it also increases the expected number of searches until finding a match. And in fact, in equilibrium, it turns out that the second effect outweighs the first in a sense, in that an increase in the size of the product line reduces the number of consumers who choose to search. And that's what we mean, in that sense, our model, is consistent with the choice overload phenomenon. Of course, those consumers who do search are going to have a higher probability of purchasing, right? But fewer consumers are going to search. And we're going to give a condition under which the equilibrium product variety may be socially excessive or insufficient. Okay, and that has something to do with essentially all depends on the distribution of search costs. Okay. Now, in the first part of the paper, which is probably going to take most of this presentation, we have a model of sequential random search. In the second part of the paper, we at least allow for the possibility of directed search by introducing the notion of there being potential product slots, and that are distinguishable. So that could be in a physical world, in a supermarket, you have different aisles and different shelves, or it could be maybe in an online world, it could be that you get some recommendations, right? The firm might say, well, why don't you first look at this product and then next at the following? And consumers are free, of course, to then follow this recommendation or not. And as well as, it's their decision, where to, in a supermarket, where to go first, where to search first. Okay. Now, in that context, we show that this random allocation, random search equilibrium, or equivalently one where recommendations are completely uninformative, continues to exist. But there also exist other equilibria where products are positioned in a sense, or where there are recommendations are informative. In fact, an extreme one where there is a deterministic mapping from products to slots, and a particular, deterministic search sequence, or put differently, recommendations are perfectly informative and consumers follow those recommendations in terms of the order of search. In some sense, of course, that is going to be efficient. However, we're showing that from the viewpoint of the firm, that may or may not be better, actually. So it might be the case that this is actually less profitable. And the reason is that not all consumers now are going to search until finding a match. And then there's going to be an entire continuum of equilibria, which we call random positioning equilibria or noisy recommendations equilibria, in which the allocation of products to slots is random, although not uniformly random, but the search order is not random. Okay, so in other words, we can think of firms making recommendations. These recommendations are noisy, but consumers all follow these recommendations in terms of search order. We also show that if firms can, upon inspection, disclose the identity of the product. So I should say, in the baseline, actually consumers only find out whether they have a match or not and what the match condition valuation is, but not what is the identity of the product. But if the firm could disclose it, then actually this pure positioning equilibrium or perfectly informative recommendation equilibrium doesn't, actually fails to exist, and only random positioning equilibria survive. Okay, and then we also have extensions to platforms, but I'm sure I'm not going to have time to talk about it, and I'm not going to mention it now. Okay. Now, there is also, in the interest of time, here's just a few related papers. I think in the interest of time, I hope no one is going to be mad at me, but I'm not going to talk about it. It's just not too much time. Maybe afterwards we can discuss it. Okay. And I'm sure there are lots of missing papers here, I'm sure. But anyway, so these seem to be the most obvious related papers. So for the search people, in a sense, it is related to the Walensky type model, but with lots of important differences, not least various kinds of heterogeneity in terms of products as well as in terms of search costs. Okay, so without any further ado, let me start the baseline model. We're going to have an industry with a countably infinite number of products indexed by I. There's going to be a monopoly seller who chooses two things, namely, it's going to decide which subset script I of products to offer. And then for each one of the products he offers, it's going to decide on the prices he's charging. They're constant identical marginal cost, normalized to zero, no fixed costs. There's a unit mass of consumers with unit demand. Those consumers differ in their search costs. Search costs are denoted by C. Think of some continuous CDF G with some support, the support equal to the positive rely. And now each product I is characterized by its popularity. That's this match probability mu I between 0 and 1. So that's the probability that any consumer who inspects that product has a match. What is a match? Well, first, what does it mean if I don't have a match? It means that I don't value the product at all. Okay. What is if I do have a match? Well, then I draw. Then I have a match condition evaluation, which initially is unknown. That's the V. The V is drawn from some continuous distribution function F. Okay. Now, an important assumption, one that makes the model tractable, but it should be kept in mind, is this match condition evaluation is the same for all the products with which a given consumer has a match. Okay. It doesn't know it ex ante, but essentially, but it's the same for all products. So you could think about, in other words, another way of putting it, any given consumer, if you like, has two types of variation. Either he doesn't like a good, then the variation is 0. Or if he likes a good, then he has a particular variation V. That V is initially unknown to him, and he doesn't know it in particular for which product it is V and for which it is 0, right? But without, if the V were drawn in U for each product, this would make the model, even with two products, already untractable, unfortunately.
So, Volker, can I ask you, so why don't you just have consumers having some valuation, and that might differ for different products, and then some products have simply a higher...
Yeah, that makes it, but that's essentially the same thing. If you have different variations, it's pretty much the same thing. It makes it untractable. You're going to see, I mean, as you probably know better than me, introducing heterogeneity in sequential search models is quite difficult, actually. And
so now you could have that there is a high match value, but they have low valuations. Is that?
No. Sorry. Okay. So no, you misunderstood what I said. Or I didn't express myself clearly. So what I said is, if you have a match, you have a particular variation V, which initially you don't know. Okay. It's a variation that's drawn from some distribution. Whenever you have a match, you have that variation. You learn it upon the first inspection of a product where you have a match. Okay. It's different across consumers. Different consumers have different variations. But from the ex post, if you knew what variation is, essentially, if you knew it as a consumer, there's some products with which you would have a variation V, and for some products you would have a variation 0. Okay? But you don't know which one is which. And initially you don't even know what your V is.
So just to make sure I'm following, this is different than if you had these IID, but with a mass point at negative infinity.
That's right, exactly. Okay. So having to be honest, I would prefer assuming IID with a mass point at 0, if you, right? But actually that makes the model completely untractable. Later on, if you have time, we can talk about why it would. But yeah, it's Okay. So consumer in the baseline, consumer search is random and it's sequential, right? Sequential is throughout the paper, but the random is only the baseline. So first think about the first stage where consumers learns his search cost. So each consumer knows his own or learns initially his first search cost C. And what he also observes is the number of products that the firm offers, but doesn't observe which product it is, just observes the size of the product line, but not the identity of the products. Then consumers decide whether to start searching or not. If they don't, they get a payoff 0. If they do, then they incur search cost C and randomly pick the first product and inspect it. And upon inspection, they learn first the price. They learn whether they have a match or not. If they don't have a match, their variation 0. If they have a match, they learn the match condition variation V. At this point, they would know that for any other product where they have a match, it would be the same V. Okay. Now, and then they decide, after inspecting the first product, whether to inspect further products or not. Okay. And if so, for each inspection, you would pay the search cost C. Okay, so the timing is as follows. At stage 1, the firm chooses the size N of the product line, so the number of products offered. That's observed by consumers. At stage 2, the firm chooses the products that it wants to offer, conditional on the number of products being N, what was chosen at stage 1, and sets the prices. That what the firm does on stage 2 is unobservable to consumers. And then at stage 3, consumer search occurs. Okay. Now, so notice here that for any choice of N, this at stage 1, stages 2 and 3 form a proper subgame of incomplete information. Now, throughout the paper, we focus on, or for most of the paper, we focus on perfect Bayesian equilibrium with passive beliefs. So that means that when encountering out of equilibrium prices, and that's the only thing which can be out of equilibrium here, right? Whether you have a match or not, that can't be out of equilibrium, right? There's always some probability that you might not have a match, but what can be out of equilibrium is a price that you observe upon inspection. And if that price shouldn't be charged in equilibrium, you somehow must form beliefs about what the firm has done. And here the assumption is for most of what we're doing, we assume passive belief. So the consumer sticks to the belief that the firm has chosen the subgame equilibrium product portfolio and set the subgame equilibrium prices for all not yet inspected products. Let me, at this point, make some little comment on, you might find it odd that we have decided here to, the firm makes decisions at both stage 1 and stage 2. Why is it done that way? Why is it not a single stage, you might ask? Well, if we had assumed it's a single stage, actually in equilibrium, you could support, with choosing the right out of equilibrium beliefs, you could choose any number of products the firm chooses to offer in equilibrium, right? Because the difference is that with what we assume here with the separate stages, if the firm were to deviate from the equilibrium number of products, it's just still a proper subgame. And so then, we are still assuming the firm is now playing, everyone is now playing the equilibrium in that subgame. Okay. Whereas if stages 1 and 2 were formed a single stage, then actually, if the firm were to deviate and choose an out of equilibrium number of products, there's nothing that would now actually pin down beliefs. Okay, and you couldn't passive beliefs wouldn't make sense, either. Okay, so that's just a technical comment here. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So anyway, so that's
Volker, I have a question for you. So you've got the first stage, you choose the size of the product line. I think you said earlier there's an infinite number of products.
Yeah, so you could in principle also choose, but you're not doing this. You could in principle.
Okay, you're choosing.
So you
could choose from an infinite number,
yes.
but you're choosing an actual number n.
Yeah, you could also.
Yeah, that's a finite number.
Yeah, it could also be infinite. It could be infinite.
It could be, but we're thinking of n as an integer.
Yes,
or it could be
or
infinite. Yeah,
It could be
but there's not an infinite number in front of the consumer unless she knows that because she's
Yes.
observed the first stage.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, thanks.
Now I should say that while I'm talking about passive, we for some of the results actually we also focus on equilibria that are robust to alternative consistent beliefs. Okay, and we introduce this novel notion of a belief-proof perfect Bayesian equilibrium. What is a belief-proof perfect Bayesian equilibrium? Essentially, it's an equilibrium that survives no matter what the out of equilibrium beliefs are. Okay, as long as they're consistent. Meaning consistent here that they shouldn't depend on things that are payoff irrelevant. So in what we do in our analysis, what matters is only that, if Dan and I have observed the same things, but he has different search costs from me, then we believe the same thing. So just the fact that we have different search costs shouldn't affect our beliefs about what the firm has done. Okay, so we're going to have the same beliefs. But no matter what these beliefs are, the equilibrium survives. Okay, so that's our notion of belief-proof equilibrium. Okay, so then just some notation here. S of P is consumer surplus conditional on a match if the firm charges a price of P. Pi of P is the profit condition on a match if the firm charges P. And actually we assume that this pi of P has unique maximizers, and that's PM, the monopoly price. Okay, monopoly price in that sense. Okay, and pi M is then just the monopoly profit condition on a match, and SM the consumer surplus on a product where the monopoly price is charged. Okay. Any questions on the model?
So do you have a setting in mind where it is natural to think that stages 1 and 2 are separate? I understand the technical kind of reason why you do it, but it seems to me that, at least I couldn't immediately think of a case where consumers observe the size of the product line before they actually know what kind of products are offered.
Well, I mean, size of the product line might be actually how big the supermarket is. It's not exactly the same thing, of course, but think about this as being something like that. Okay.
But even if this wasn't the case, is it simply a refinement if you were to change the time?
Yeah, you could also think about this as being a refinement of the other thing, indeed. Everything I'm saying now is just the main thing is that otherwise, it's hard to pin down, anything can be supported as an equilibrium of products. That's still, a lot of the results would still hold, but just conditional on the number of, wouldn't have much otherwise to say about what is the equilibrium number of products. And that you can view as dense as a refinement of that. Essentially that I'm doing, if you observe an out of equilibrium number of products, your belief is that I'm still doing what would be optimal for the firm to do given this number, in a sense, that you observe.
And one other question, once a consumer has found a match, the only reason to search is to find a lower price.
Indeed, that would be the only reason to, indeed.
So when there is a downward deviation, consumer will never continue searching, only if there is an upward deviation.
Right. If the belief is, yes. Yeah.
Passive belief, yeah. With passive beliefs, yeah, okay.
Okay, let's start very simple. Suppose the firm had chosen, and now for the, at the beginning now, I'm always looking at sub-games indexed by N, okay? So suppose the firm has chosen to offer just a single product, okay? And now suppose that in the PBE of the ensuing sub-game, it involves the firm choosing product J and charging price P, okay? Now, if that were the equilibrium of the sub-game, what would consumers do? Well, all consumers with a search cost C, there's less than the expected surplus, which is mu j, the probability of a match, times S of P, which is the match conditional expected surplus, would search, and all consumers C above mu j S of P would not search. Okay. Now let's look at a deviation by the firm. Okay, suppose the firm were to deviate by, instead of offering product J, offering product I, which by the way may or may not be the same as J, and charging a price of P tilde. What would be the deviation profit of the firm? Well, the deviation profit of that firm, actually, do you see when I sort of highlight things? So first let's look at, so for all the consumers who search, what would be the profit? Well, on those consumers, it would make a profit of mu I, which is the probability that any consumer searches has a match with a product, I, times pi of P tilde, given that the firm charges a price P tilde. Okay, and that's multiplied by the number of consumers who search. And that, however, doesn't depend on mu I, and doesn't depend on P tilde, but just depends on what consumers believe. And what consumers believe is what's happening in equilibrium. So that's just G, which was, remember, the CDF of the search cost distribution, evaluated at mu J S of P. Okay. Now, that deviation profit, of course, then is maximized by choosing the product I that has the highest mu I, and that's product 1. Or I think I forgot to mention that products are ordered by their popularity, with product 1 being the most popular, product 2 the second most popular, product 3 the third most popular, and so on. Okay, and in the limit, as I goes to infinity, mu I goes to 0. Right? There's a long tail of rather unattractive products. Okay. Anyway, so that expression is maximized by choosing it doesn't work very well here. This is highlighting by choosing the most popular product and charging the monopoly price PM. Hence, in the unique equilibrium of this subgame, the firm would choose product 1 and charge the monopoly price. And then all consumers with search cost C less than mu1 times SM would inspect the product, and others do not. Okay, so now what I'm trying to explain now is that this logic extends to any larger product line N. And in order to, show you this, let's first consider candidate equilibrium, where the firm charges the same price P on all of the products. Okay, later on I'm going to say that that's actually what's going to happen in equilibrium, but first let's assume that. Now, if that's the case, given what Jose Luis already said, of course, that means that consumer search is rather simple in that once you have a match, you're going to stop searching, okay? Because there's no point, right? But of course, one question is still, are you actually, how many, are you going to search at all? And are you continuing searching if you don't have a match, okay? Now, the important thing is when consumers now search, they don't know what product they're looking at. They just know whether they have a match or not, and conditional on the match, what the match condition relation is. But they don't know, is it now, if if 2 products are on offer, is the first product 1 or is it product 2? But of course they update, right? Being Bayesians. And so let's denote by alpha k of I, depends of course on the product portfolio I, the probability of a match at the kth inspection, conditional on not having had a match at the previous k-1 inspections. Okay. And so an important feature here is what you might call increasing optimism, that this alpha k is strictly increasing in k. That actually, if you don't have a match with a, say the first product you inspect, you're actually becoming more optimistic about having a match at the second inspection. And if you don't have an inspection, a match at the second inspection, you become more optimistic that you're going to have an inspection, a match at the third inspection, and so on, right? So you become increasingly optimistic. And now why is that? Well, intuitively, I'm not going to prove it here given time, but it's kind of intuitive because you don't know which product it is, but if you didn't have a match, you put higher probability mass on this being one of the less popular products, right? And therefore, you think that actually in the remaining pool of uninspected products, the average popularity is higher than the popularity in the overall pool. So in particular, higher than the products you've already inspected.
Volker, can I interrupt you for
Yes.
well, it's not even a question, more a comment. So I can see here where your assumption about preferences kind of comes in strongly. So you assume that products differ in probability that you get a draw from this distribution F, but then the F distribution is the same for all of the products.
That's right.
Because if F distribution was different across products, then products would command different prices, different monopoly prices, so to say. Now you have single monopoly price to work with. And then you could also learn from prices on the path.
Right. Of course, then the question, indeed, absolutely right. But then you would have an issue in terms of, well, maybe the firm would find it profitable. I mean, it's not clear, actually. This comes back to later, the sort of to what extent the firm has an interest actually in you finding out. So actually the firm might want actually to confuse you. I mean, but absolutely, yes.
That's right. But so let's say
but
semi-naive prices would reveal which product you're looking at, and then
it would. And then it would update. Then it would, if the price, I mean, that's still in principle could, well, can come back in a minute if you know. But yes, of course, then prices could reveal something. Indeed.
Just so you know, you have a little bit under 20 minutes.
Okay, so let's, oh God. Okay, so now what this means is, as I already said, the consumer will start searching, keep searching until finding a match. The probability of finding a match is M of I. And each consumer generates a profit so each searching consumer generates a profit of M of I times pi of P. Now, an important result is, which took us a long time to prove, is the following on the monopoly. Essentially, that the monopoly profit is an upper bound of the profit you can get. So fix the size N of the product line. In the continuation subgame, for any given consistent consumer beliefs and any optimal search strategy given these beliefs, off as well as on the equilibrium path, the firm cannot obtain an expected per consumer profit greater than M of IN, where IN is the set of products where offer the N most popular ones, times pi n. Okay, and that means that offering the most popular products at this monopoly price of PM constitutes a belief-proof continuation equilibrium, because any deviation cannot affect the number of consumers who start searching, and it can only decrease the profit generated by them, regardless of how consumers revise their beliefs, by this lemma. Okay. And conversely, this constitutes also unique belief-proof continuation equilibrium, because if you try to sustain another equilibrium, then you could always, where these prices are not these monopoly price, you could always find another set of prices, out of equilibrium prices, sufficient arbitrarily close to the monopoly price, and choose, if you like, with very optimistic beliefs, so that indeed this deviation would be profitable. Okay. And so some notation is Cn of lower bar then would be in this equilibrium the threshold search cost below which consumers would then search. Okay, and that's just given by this ratio of M over N, where M again is the probability of a match, and capital N here is the expected number of inspections until the first match. That M over N times the monopoly surplus SM. Okay, and so what this proposition then says, it characterizes the unique belief-proof equilibrium. Essentially says that the firm offers the most popular products at the monopoly price, and consumers keep searching until finding the match if the search cost is lower than the Cn lower bar and do not search otherwise. And then upon finding a match, consumers stop searching and purchase the product if the variation exceeds the monopoly price. Okay. Now, so that's with belief proof. There's a unique belief proof equilibrium. If you just use passive beliefs, then you can show that this monopoly pricing equilibrium is the unique equilibrium that has with constant prices, but you might sometimes be able to construct equilibria where prices are different. For instance, here an example is where we have n is equal to 2, where you charge the monopoly price on the most popular product 1 and a price below the monopoly price for the less popular one. And you have parameters such that most consumers that encounter product 1 first stop searching, even in the absence of a match. Okay, so in some sense, by whatever is the first, price are fully revealing, right? And the issue here is that if you find out that what you've just had is the most popular product and you don't like it, you stop searching. Okay, and although it is you might find it strange here is that the firm charges the price below the monopoly price on product 2. Why is it not profitable to deviate to the monopoly price on product 2? Well, or to an out of equilibrium price? Well, then consumers, or at least some consumers, would stop searching when they find product 2 first, whereas they would continue searching if you didn't deviate. Okay, so now I haven't yet told you at all what this has to do with choice overload. Now let's think about how does a change in the size of the product line affect consumer search behavior and welfare. Now, extending here the size of the product line, so increasing n, has two opposing effects, as already mentioned at the beginning. On the one hand, of course, it means that it increases the probability of a match. That's good, of course, right, for the consumers. But it's bad. What's bad about it, it increases the number of searches until finding a match, because the average, the larger the size of the product line, the lower is the average popularity of the products on offer. And therefore, the longer it takes for consumer to find a product he likes. Okay. And in fact, it turns out that the second effect outweighs the first, so that expanding the product line reduces the number of consumers who search. So the CN lower bar, this threshold on search cost below which consumers search and above which consumers don't search, strictly decreases in n. And moreover, as n goes to infinity, it goes to 0. So it means that, if you were to offer what Simon said, all products, actually no consumer would search.
Volker,
yeah.
One more comment. So I'm thinking, if you were to have heterogeneity between good match products, which you don't, they all have the same V match, you would probably even strengthen this, because somehow intuitively, the more substitutes you carry, which are differentiated, the higher is the price you would want to charge for each of them. So there would be an additional effect where increasing n would also increase the anticipated prices that consumers expect to see.
I mean, the problem, this comes back again why it's unfortunately intractable to look at, these IID draws, because in essence, when you think about it, think about the following. It's not even so clear anymore what is the monopoly price. With a single product, it's clear, it's the way I define it this way. Now imagine you get a new draw for the second product. So in some sense, you could think about consumers who look at 2 products have higher monopoly price than consumers who only look at 1 product. Yeah, because you get 2 draws. And so actually solving it's just...
I agree. So that's kind of what I was saying, that the more products you have, independent draws you have, so to say, the higher is your multi-product monopoly price kind of vector.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So there you would get, indeed. So you would, the issue is, of course, proving that equilibria, how equilibria look like,
Yeah, so this is, me and Heskey, we have this showrooming paper where shops differ in terms of how many varieties they carry, 2 versus 1 in particular. And the ones that carry two varieties, they charge higher prices because of hold up, but also because they have bigger portfolio.
Right. Yeah, indeed. Okay, so given time, unfortunately, I can't really explain why that choice overload is, I mean.
Yeah, you've got about 12 minutes.
Indeed. Okay, so I think you hope you understand. Okay, so let me just say, some consumers benefit from, I say there's choice overload, but it's not that everyone actually is hurt by more products. Consumers with low search costs benefit from more products. But consumers with sort of higher search costs, at least as long as they're not too high, of course, if they're very high, they don't search at all, but they would actually be hurt. Okay, and so as a result of this immediate thing becomes, now so far I just looked at the sub game, for given size of the product line, what's going to happen, and I said something about comparative statics. If you like, what if I change the size of the product line? Well, but what is actually the equilibrium size of the product line, the one that maximizes profit? Well, if coming back to this infinite thing, of course, if we didn't have this heterogeneity in the match probability, if all products had the same mu, of course, I would offer all products, no matter how large the number of available products is, and if it's infinite, I would offer infinite products. But here, I don't, right? It's always it would always be a finite number, and that because too many products would just dilute probability. And this comes then, you might ask, well, then what are the private versus social incentives to provide product variety? Let me just, again, given time, let me just say it all depends on the following function, CE of C. So what is CE of C? So CE of C is the average, essentially is the average cost of the searches. Okay, right, it's the average search cost of the searcher. And if the search cost of the marginal searcher is C, okay? And so it all depends upon whether this ratio of CE of C over C, whether that's smaller than 1 or, sorry, that's always smaller one, whether that is increasing or not. So if C of C increases less than proportionally with C, then the firm offers more products than would maximize consumer surplus or social welfare. If C of C increases more than proportionally with C, then the opposite is the case. We get too little variety. So it all just depends. And that's sort of, for some of you, I guess, is probably reminiscent, at least, of Spence's price versus quality trade-off. In Spence, the cost of increasing quality, the difference, of course, is there. It's the firm that bears the cost of increasing quality. Here, actually, the firm doesn't bear any cost. It's just the consumer who bears the search cost. But it's still, what you can see is it's the difference between what the social planner in some sense cares about the average consumer, whereas the firm cares about the marginal consumer, right? So in that sense, it's sort of reminiscent. We have all kinds of comparative statics. Let me not, get into this. Instead, let me, the last, 10 minutes or so?
A little bit less, about 8 minutes.
Okay, let me talk about distinguishable product slots. Okay, so far, in the background, we had indistinguishable slots, so that search is necessarily random. But now suppose that these different aisles and shelves in a supermarket, or the firm can make recommendations in which order consumers should look at products, and consumers are free to ignore them. Okay. And okay, so let me not get you into technical details here. Is the most important, first thing here to notice is that this equilibrium that I described before under random search now continues to survive. Okay, essentially it's an equilibrium where there is, the firm uniformly randomizes in its allocation of products to slots, and consumers randomly look at these, or equivalently, where the firm makes completely uninformative recommendations and consumers ignore those. Okay, and yeah, but let me not go into the proof. Instead, let me point out, and here I'm doing this now just for a special case. Suppose for two products, okay? Suppose just the firm, they're just, n is either 1 or 2, okay? And of course, if it's equal to 1, obviously clear anyway, but now, suppose the interesting thing is what's going to happen with n equal to 2. And now there exists an equilibrium in which the following happens. Say the firm, there's a deterministic mapping from products to slots. Say if you think about slots being ordered, for instance, 1 and 2, puts product 1, say, in slot 1, product 2 in slot 2, and in equilibrium, consumers, those that search, first look at slot 1. If they don't like the good, they may, and if they choose to continue searching, they then go to slot 2. Okay. Now, the important thing, though, is what's happening in this equilibrium is that while in some sense it's efficient, now consumers know which product is in which slot. And so as a result, more consumers relative to the random search equilibrium start searching. That's the good thing for the firm. But it's no longer the case that all consumers who start searching keep searching until finding a match. Okay, so if consumers didn't find a match with the first with a product that was allocated to the first slot, or the product that they were told to look at first, some of those consumers are going to stop searching, namely, and that depends on the search costs. Okay, so if you don't have very low search costs, and the only product you haven't inspected yet is product 2, and that's not very popular, you stop searching. Okay, and now it turns out that this is not necessarily in the interest of the firm. Okay, so you can find conditions on the search cost distribution and the relative popularities of the product, so that actually the firm would be worse off in this equilibrium. Although from the viewpoint of consumers are always better off in this equilibrium. Okay, in this pure positioning equilibrium, this where recommendations are perfectly informative. Okay, and now in addition, there exists always a continuum of other equilibria. Now these other equilibria, you can think of this as being equilibria where the allocation of products to slots is random, although not uniformly random. But search in terms of slots is deterministic, or it's completely directed. Think of consumers always looking first at slot 1 and then at slot 2. But which product the firm puts in slot 1 and which product the firm puts in slot 2 is random, but not necessarily. And these products and these equilibria, if you like, can be ordered in terms of what is the probability that you put the most popular product in the slot that is inspected first. So in this example, slot 1. Okay, or put differently, firms make recommendations. Consumers always follow these recommendations, but recommendations are noisy. The firm always puts some probability. In some sense, recommends the wrong product, maybe the less popular product, to inspect first, although it would be more efficient, of course, to first recommend the more popular product. However, the probability that the firm puts the most popular product in slot 1, the one that's inspected first, can't be too high. Okay, so there's some probability R upper bar here, which is the highest probability with which the most popular product is put in the slot that's inspected first. Because if it were too high, the consumers that would look at that slot first and didn't find a match, some of those would stop searching, because all these equilibria here I'm talking about have the feature that consumers who don't find a match upon the first inspection continue searching. Okay, so, and that's good for the firm. Okay, so in fact, therefore you can Pareto rank these equilibria, and the best for consumers and the firm is the one where the probability of putting product 1 in slot 1 is upper bar, which is, you know, strictly less than 1, but strictly higher than a half. Okay, and you know, and of course, in some sense, this equilibrium that I was talking about in the first part of the paper is in some sense just a special case here where R is equal to half. So this
you have about a minute or two to wrap up.
Okay, let me just say one thing. So if you allow for the possibility of disclosure, that the firm, upon you know, consumer inspecting a product, disclose the identity of the product, this pure position equilibrium with the perfect informative recommendation ceases to exist, because the firm then has an incentive to fool the consumer. You know, namely to put the less popular product in the slot that's inspected first, and then inform consumers upon inspection that this is the less popular product. And then consumers would understand that in the other not yet inspected slot is the more popular product, and then they'll all continue searching. And that's in the firm's interest. Okay, and that completely destroys perfectly informative equilibrium. Okay, so let me wrap up. So we've developed here a consumer search model in which the monopolist can choose to offer any subset among a set of heterogeneous products. Observing only the size of the product line, consumers engage in random sequential search to find out prices and these match conditional valuations. While searching, consumers update their beliefs about the match probability at the next inspection. And you know, during the search, then consumers get more and more optimistic. If they haven't found a match yet, they think, you know, it's more likely they're going to find a match at the next inspection. So there's continue searching until finding a match, or until having exhausted all of the products. And you know, I've shown you that this leads to choice overload phenomenon, that an increase in the size of a product line induces fewer consumers to search. But of course, some consumers benefit. And, you know, of course, it doesn't mean that the firm just offers a single product. The firm, there is an optimal number that might be much larger than one, but still, you know, it's not infinite. So you want to restrict choice so as, you know, not to completely crowd out consumers. And, you know, we've provided conditions in which the firm provides excessive or insufficient product variety. I haven't shown you anything about comparative statics. And then in this extension where the firm can make recommendations that consumers are free to ignore or to follow, or where it can allocate products to distinguishable slots, and consumers then still can choose which slots to look at first, showed that these random search equilibria continue to exist, or no positioning equilibria, if you like. There's also the opposite of pure positioning equilibrium, but that wouldn't survive disclosure. And then this whole continuum of search equilibrium. And actually, in the best random search equilibrium, or random positioning equilibrium, what actually is happening is, you know, I was just talking about this R upper bar, right? So remember, in the baseline model, consumers got more and more optimistic about the probability of a match at the next inspection. In some sense, what this means is, if you think about the marginal searcher, the marginal searcher's participation constraint is binding, right? And it's binding at the first inspection, but it becomes, because it becomes more optimistic, it actually gets slack for the second inspection and so on. But if the firm randomizes differently, you know, puts a higher probability than a half in putting the more popular product in slot 1, essentially you remove some of this slack, And in the best equilibrium, where this probability of putting the most popular product in slot 1 is just upper bar, you actually have the consumer also indifferent between continuing to search and not. Okay, so you remove all of the slack. Okay, and that's, you know, of course, in the interest of the firm and in the interest of consumers.
Do you want to wrap it here, and then
Yes, that's it.
We'll open it up for questions.
Volker, I have a question. So in the model is rather similar to Marcel Preuss's job market paper, no? So, but in terms of the structure of the match value and the fact that it's common across and there is this matching.
Yes, I think.
So there is some information that arrives and that creates some selection. So here you don't have any selection, so there is nothing really very interesting happening on prices here.
That's right. I mean, instead we could also just have assumed, you know,
right. So that was my question, because here, because really prices don't play much of a role, could you maybe relax some of the assumption by assuming that the prices are constant, you know, just.
Yeah, sure.
Because
I mean,
there it's really the interesting part is the selection that creates the price discrimination. So I was waiting to see if when you could set the slots, there would be some reason for you to discriminate, but because the search cost doesn't interact with the demand at all, they are separable, you don't have any incentive to price discriminate.
That's right. I mean, in some sense, yes, indeed, very good. Actually, the reason, I mean, first of all, let me talk about price discrimination. So this monopoly result that this is the upper bound has to do with the fact that actually, if you tried what you would like, actually, here search works against you. What you would like to do is you would like to charge a higher price to consumers, higher variations, but you can't, because actually, you know, for the same beliefs, consumers higher variations, if anything, would tend to want to search more, not less. And so therefore, actually, if you were to charge different prices, you would end up, you know, higher variation consumers would end up with charging, you know, being charged on lower prices. Yeah, so I guess, sure, if you were just to assume that for exogenous reasons, all products have the same price, yes, I think you could relax the number of assumptions. Yeah. It makes, yeah, it's just the pricing that makes things complicated. That's it.
Volker, I mean, one thing that's sort of helpful here, and for the increasing optimism, is people don't recognize the kind of product it is. Like they don't know the index. They don't know that this product is even after they've seen it, they don't recognize that this is more likely to have been a popular product.
That's right. Except in the last, you know, thing where we allow for disclosure, right? Then the firm is free, you know,
to do that. But you know, I mean, if I'm thinking about the jam example, you know, I know if it's strawberry jam or if it's loganberry jam, and I could probably hazard a guess which is likely to be the more popular one. So I'm trying to think through that case.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, to be honest, I mean, it's you know, so here, I mean, in some sense, first of all, one question is, does the firm have an incentive actually to reveal that? And, you know, this result on the comparison of, in terms of profitability of the random search equilibrium, and of course, even more.
Sure. I mean, I understand you've done that analysis. So that, I mean, that's a question you can ask, but I'm saying another question that one could ask is if the firm didn't have a choice about it, and if consumers understood which products were more popular or not.
Sure. Then you don't get search randomly. Right. If it's exogenous, then the consumers would search in the efficient order, and then you don't get search overload, but then the firm would offer all products.
Yes, with no stocking cost or something, sure.
As an intermediate case, though, if they couldn't display the quality, but it was immediately understood why you didn't like it after seeing it, would that behave differently? So they still can't disclose in change order,
Yeah, so that essentially what you're saying is, well, what if you, I mean, in some sense, it's would be the case, which haven't really looked at, is a case where the firm is sort of has to disclose each product upon inspection, right? But I guess, yes, we do have, well, actually, having said this, with 2 products, it doesn't, yeah, no, I guess it doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, yeah, so in some sense, it's related to our analysis on disclosure, I think. So let me think. So in the, well, if you have to disclose it, it might be the case, I mean, it could be the case you still get choice overload. Yeah, it's not necessarily clear that you want to offer all products, even if consumers find it exposed optimally, because, you know, it might still incur, if search is random, right? You first find there are 2 products. One product is very unpopular. One product is popular. A lot of consumers might be deterred by knowing that with probably 50%, they're going to find an unpopular product because they only observe this upon inspection. So the firm might just want to offer 1 product, because offering 2 could be worse. You don't get as strong as a result, but you can construct examples in that sense where you still get choice overload.
Thanks.
Can I ask, I'm kind of also thinking a little bit about whether it really is choice overload that you kind of find. So one, in the sense that relating it back to your example, you say that the sales of these firms went down or up if they reduced the product line. So could you calculate sales here for some sort of simple distributions of C? So for example, if you have a uniform C, could you say whether the actual total sales of the firm go up or down?
Well, I mean, that obviously depends, right?
Yeah, no. But for example, if you have uniform search cost or whatever, something.
Yeah, but again, it doesn't make, I mean, when you think about the fact that there is a profit maximizing number of, and here cost, there are no costs, right? So therefore sales maximizing number of products means that any, so if for instance, the status quo is you start from that and now you change choice, either increase it or decrease it, you would get less sales. So it's so obviously, right? So
sure.
Therefore, sure, you can construct.
So every way you go to smaller
it depends on what are the 2 ends that you compare, right?
Yeah. Okay. And another thing, when you think about, like, because here what is also important is that the MUs are common for all consumers, right? That my MU with a certain product is the same as some other chap's MU, such that the firm knows which are kind of the more popular products to everybody. And that means that it can order them in that way and then offer these best products in terms of popularity. That also kind of drives the result. Can you somehow, do you know if the MUs would be independent, whether everything would totally disappear or whether stuff would still go through?
Completely independent. So you mean, average?
I guess, I mean, in between it's difficult always. So let's start.
I guess if it's completely independent, of course, then they essentially what you're saying, they have the same MU, right? I mean, because
for expectations.
If you think about it, doesn't make any, right? Doesn't make any sense. I mean, what the firm cares about is what is, for an average consumer, for randomly picked consumer, what is the probability that this consumer has a match?
Yeah.
If consumers have different MUs, doesn't matter for the firm, right? So in that sense, the analysis, you can, if you like, or put differently, you could, in the baseline model, you could get some more fake generality by having some heterogeneity in the MUs amongst consumers. Of course, now then that would mean if consumers know the MUs in advance, that would mean that you would get different C lower bars, different, the threshold search cost might depend on, you know, what your distribution of Muse is, right? So consumer, but overall nothing would change, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because it's somehow it's still like a little bit, I think to me it feels a little bit disjoint, the what happens in the model, that, you know, somehow fewer people search, although, and the V is the same, and then what happens in these experiments, let's say in this choice overload. But maybe there are other ways to think about it that would be closer. Yeah, sorry, thanks.
So could I just follow up on Eva's question? I mean, the way I understood this sort of Barry Schwartz stuff and the jam experiments was, you know, the people try out all the jams, and, you know, if they try 6, they end up buying one of them, but if they try 18, they don't eat any of them. Now, that's not what's happening in your model. Now, so it might be that I've read these experiments the wrong way.
Yeah,
and that's not what they do.
Okay, so first of all, we are not, I mean, the model is not really there. Okay, now here's a model just to look at the experiments, but it's...
No, that's fine. But I mean, you know, you're motivating it by choice overload. So I think...
And I can tell you by inspection, you know, introspection, that's exactly, if you give me too much choice, I'm not even going to try. I mean, often. So no, I don't have the time. I really don't, you know, I would, you know, probably often, because I want then, you know, have more choice. I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. I would just, you know, postpone my purchasing decision, if at all, and just often don't consume, right? So because I find it, you know, if you give me too much choice, it's a hard, you know, it's just time consuming to find out. It's just...
That's fine, but I mean, I think it would be interesting to go back to those 2 papers you cited and to some of these Barry Schwartz book or whatever it is, and see if they do distinguish these kinds of 2 stories, or see if, you know, I mean, it might be that they pull both effects, and so there's no way to tell those stories apart. It might be that one could run additional experiments to distinguish those stories, and that might be relevant for that literature, you know, even if it's less relevant for the search literature. But just as a matter of curiosity, I'm curious to know what those papers said. That I think that's the point, and that's sort of the spirit in which I took Eva's observation.
I'm not even so sure that they really, okay, yeah, with the online stores, I don't think they can even then.
That's right. So I mean, it might be that you can't distinguish. That's fine. But I mean, some of these papers, I think, were trying to go after a more psychological aspect. So it might just be useful to characterize that and to comment on it, and to, you know, be clear about the limits of what you are and aren't saying.
Maybe if I can follow up with a more technical other question. So you characterized the firm optimal one, which was in the noisy recommendation equilibria, where the probability that the next product is relevant remained constant, if I understood you correct.
Sorry, again, sorry, didn't quite.
You characterized the firm optimal equilibrium, which was the noisy recommendation equilibrium, if I understood you correctly.
Yeah, right.
Where if I continue searching, the probability that the next product is relevant or is a good fit remains constant. So although I have negative news,
that's right,
it doesn't change. This kind of suggests that this could be generalized to an end product case.
Yes.
That you just have that.
Yeah.
So what's the precise reason why you can't do that? Or what's the technical challenge there?
Oh, I think we could do that. I mean, I think I can't remember now why we. I mean, there was one thing. I mean, it might have to do again with the pricing stuff. I can't remember. It might have to do nothing with this particular equilibrium here that we did. But yeah, to be honest, I don't remember. There was some issue initially. I wrote it up, I think, with a more general number of products, and at some point realized it's somewhere we had some issue, and then we decreased it to 2. But I can't, I don't recall at the moment what that issue was. Sorry. But yeah, you would think, indeed, you would think that indeed I just choose do it in a way so that, given the search here is completely deterministic, right? The search order, so that always the participation constraint of those consumers who didn't get a match yet is binding. Okay, and so that should be, doable,
Okay, I'm gonna cut the recording here.